Tonight on Primetime, after US strikes on Iranian military targets, Tehran has retaliated with attacks on American assets in the region, raising fears of yet more delay to a long-anticipated peace deal. Who blinks first then, Washington or Tehran? Good evening. Tensions in the Gulf have escalated after the United States carried out strikes on Iranian military sites following President Donald Trump's claim that Iran downed a US Army helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz. Well, Iran later retaliated this morning and struck the US Fifth Fleet in Bahrain.
The United States says it has completed strikes on Iranian military sites near the Strait of Hormuz after President Donald Trump accused Iran of downing a US Army Apache helicopter. In a social media post, Trump stated that the helicopter had been patrolling over the strait and that both pilots were safe and uninjured. He said the United States had to respond. A US official said the Apache was brought down by a one-way Iranian attack drone, though it was not immediately clear whether it was deliberately targeted. US Central Command said its forces hit Iranian air defense systems, ground control stations and surveillance radar sites with precision munitions. It described the operation as a proportional response to recent attacks on US forces and commercial ships in regional waters. Iran has not claimed responsibility for the helicopter incident. After the US strikes, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned that Tehran would not leave any attack unanswered and told Washington to leave the region. Iran's Revolutionary Guards later claimed attacks on US military targets in Bahrain, Kuwait and Jordan. Bahrain told residents to seek shelter after warning sirens sounded, while Kuwait said its air defenses were engaging hostile aerial targets. Iranian state media reported explosions near the Strait of Hormuz, including Keshem Island, Bandar Abbas, Sirik and Jask. It also said 2 water reservoirs were hit in southern Iran, disrupting supplies in nearby areas. Meanwhile, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian said that the country must move beyond a no-war, no-peace situation following overnight clashes, while warning that Iran would not surrender in the face of continued violations.
We must get out of this no-war, no-peace state. War is certainly not in the country's interest, but if they think that by violating our dignity, our territory, and our homeland, we will surrender or back down, then let them only dream about it. This is not something that we will back down from.
The escalation follows recent exchanges between Iran and Israel and has added uncertainty to US-Iran talks over a possible deal to end the conflict and reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, Iran has strongly condemned the move by the US and its European allies in the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency for proposing a resolution against Iran's nuclear program. Our correspondent reports now from Tehran.
In addition to their military standoff in the Middle East, Iran and the United States are clashing at the International Atomic Energy Agency as the UN Nuclear Watchdog's Board of Governors is holding its quarterly meeting in Vienna. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has written a letter to foreign ministers of member states of the agency's board denouncing the US for tabling a draft resolution against Iran's nuclear program. According to the state-owned IRNA news agency, which carried the letter, Iran's top diplomat slammed the move as politically oriented and an ill-wishing act to justify Washington's anti-Iran policies and to seek legitimacy for its attacks on Iran's nuclear sites last year. Warning against abusing the IAEA, he said that the draft reminded the June 2025 adoption of a resolution which paved the way for the 12-day Israel-US attacks and bombing of Iran's major nuclear sites under the UN safeguards. Following the air raids on Iran's 3 major civilian nuclear facilities and IAEA's failure to condemn it, Tehran suspended all its ties with the UN watchdog, with the exception of Bushehr power plant. Meantime, Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal Affairs, Kazem Gharibabadi, in a post on the social platform X, said the US draft resolution against Iran is an attempt to whitewash the crimes. Citing IAEA documents, he said the Israel-US attacks last June on Iran's nuclear facilities resulted in halting the verification activities and banning the agency's inspectors from Iran for safety reasons. Turaj Shiralilu from Tehran Foreign News.
So the confrontation between Washington and Tehran then continues. The United States says it carried out precision strikes against Iranian military infrastructure after President Trump accused Iran of bringing down a US Army helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has now responded with attacks targeting American military assets in Bahrain, Kuwait and Jordan, while warning that any further action will be met with a stronger response. The latest escalation comes at a particularly sensitive moment. Negotiations aimed at reducing tensions and securing maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz were already under strain, and questions are now being raised about whether diplomacy can survive this latest exchange. Well, joining us now to discuss all of this in the studio is the international lawyer Javid Rahimli. Javid, great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us in the studio. Legally speaking then, where is this line between escalation and self-defense?
Thank you for the invitation, Guy. First of all, under international law, use of force is generally restricted under the UN Charter, Article 2, unless it is used for self-defense or there is a UN Security Council approval. In our case, Iran or US might argue using the self-defense base that there was an attack against the US helicopter, Apache helicopter. That's probably the argument that the US government is using. That's why their response, the counter-strikes are legal based on the self-defense argument. On the other hand, Iran may say there was already initial attacks by US and Israel, despite the fact that there was a ceasefire, but that ceasefire was not in effect. The first attacks was made by the US. Therefore, attacking Apache helicopter might be as a self-defense measure. Also, they might say that's a preemptive use of force. They might say that they had the intelligence information that the Apache helicopter is not just conducting operations, what the US claim. The claim is that they were patrolling the Strait of Hormuz regarding the blockade of the Iranian Navy. So we just need more information to exactly say whether the strikes were legal or not. For current information, it's subject to the facts of the case. Also, I would like to add that even if the use of force is legal, there's also international humanitarian law issues to be taken account, because the US counter-strikes hit the water reservoirs, which are protected as a civilian infrastructure under the international law.
Yeah, of course, very good point. Just because something's technically legal doesn't always mean it's the right course of action. International law is a complex matter. It gets even more complicated, doesn't it, when you start to look at the legitimacy or not of targets in what you could call sort of third-party countries. So the attacks on American assets, but inside Bahrain, Jordan, etc. I mean, that's long been a bone of contention in this conflict. What does international law have to say about that specific scenario?
Yeah, in that case, Iran's response is clear. It's not to the US territory, it was to the US bases in the regional countries around the Gulf. So international law basically restricts such a response unless there's information which is corrected that the bases in the region were used for the attacks to Iran. For example, if Iran can prove that I attacked them, let's say, location in Kuwait or in other country, because they have been already using that base for first attacks to Iranian territory. But again, that's something needs to be proven. But however, there was no international tribunal to assess whether each attacks are legal or not. We cannot just have a 100% answer. It's like a great territory under international law.
Yeah, another factor that's become contentious in this conflict is the unintended impact that there has been on civilian infrastructure and also obviously on shipping routes too. What does international law have to say about those two elements?
Again, like international humanitarian law protects the civilians, and unfortunately this war had a devastating impact around the region. The civilians, we can see the displacement and the hunger, and also especially the recent attacks on the water reservoirs, based on some sources, will have a significant negative impact on the civilians in the region. And regarding the naval access, I will say that's definitely impacted the overall energy prices and also access to the important energy sources. The war always impacts the civilians, but if it is conducted following the international humanitarian law, at least the goal is to prevent the impact.
Yes, very good point. Then turning to the US now, a growing number of US lawmakers argue that it's Congress, not just the president alone, that must make the final decision on conflict and use of force against Iran. This debate has sort of been a bit of a roller coaster in recent months, seems to be hotting up again now. Do you think this could become a constitutional issue in Washington?
Yeah, in Washington, Democrats have been trying to push this to the Congress by accepting a resolution which will basically reduce the war powers of the President Trump in Iran. However, there was a pushback from the Republicans. They were not accepting the resolution, but recently the resolution has passed the US House, but now it's in the Senate. But the issue is, even if it passes the Senate, President Trump will not sign the resolution, so it will not become the law. However, under the US national security law, it will have a significant impact how the President Trump's war power is characterized under the US Constitution. There was previous instances where the US presidents have utilized such war powers, and it was rejected by the Congress, and it was taken before the US Supreme Court. For example, the US Supreme Court Justice Jackson had clearly stated that the presidents have war powers, and he characterized that it could be divided to three categories. When the Congress explicitly accepts the war power kind of resolution authorizing the use of force, then president has an extreme power to use force abroad. Because the US Constitution is divided. The Article 1st states that it's the Congress who has the authority to declare war, while the Article 2nd states that the US president is a commander-in-chief. So President Trump is citing to the Article 2, and Congress saying that, look, Article 1 clearly states that it's us who can declare war. And basically the Supreme Court Justice had put a clear line that if the US Congress is silent, it means that President has a moderate power, which was the case until right now. But now the resolution has passed, it limits the President Trump's war powers in Iran. If it's backed by the Senate, and in the future, if it is a case before the US Supreme Court, we might say, given there will be a resolution passed by both House and Senate, US forces used in Iran will be unconstitutional under the US law. It's already mostly illegal under international law, and it might be illegal under the US national security law and constitution as well.
Very interesting. Javid, I'm afraid every expert we have on this subject, we ask about timelines, and unfortunately you're no exception tonight. If you step back and look at this scenario, it looks to me as though the US really wants a deal, and at the same time, Iran really wants to delay signing a deal. So we're stuck somewhere between peace and war, and this is just going to go on for months and months and months, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest, my expectation is that the managed instability is the most plausible goal that they could achieve. instead of going to full-scale war, which is not beneficial for the both sides, given there will be elections in the US, and also there's also elections in Israel, and Iran is definitely not interested in ongoing war, given its casualties. And basically, Washington is in very challenging situation because right now Iran claims that there will be ceasefire only if Israel stops to attack its attacks into Lebanon, which they don't do that, and because Washington cannot shape Israel's national security policies, that's their independent security concerns vis-a-vis US-Iran negotiations.
Well, Javed, look, international law is a very complex area, and we really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through all that detail tonight. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, after the break, Israel has launched new strikes across southern Lebanon, despite warnings from Iran raising fresh questions about whether the conflict is entering an even more dangerous phase. Don't go away. A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Israel has carried out new strikes across southern Lebanon despite an Iranian warning to stop attacks in the country. Well, Lebanese sources said strikes across southern Lebanon killed at least 16 people and injured dozens. Entire Israel issued fresh evacuation orders for residents, including in the city's Christian quarter, for the first time. Lebanese authorities said the overall death toll from Israeli attacks since March has risen above 3,600, with more than 11,000 wounded. Well, this conflict in Lebanon continues to intensify. Israel has carried out another wave of strikes across southern Lebanon, with Lebanese authorities reporting at least 16 deaths and dozens of injuries. The latest attacks come despite Iranian warnings against further military action and amid growing international concern over the humanitarian impact of the conflict. In a significant development, Israel has issued new evacuation orders, as we heard, in parts of Tyre, including areas that had previously been largely unaffected by such warnings. Meanwhile, the death toll in Lebanon continues to rise as diplomatic efforts struggle to gain traction. The developments are also unfolding against the backdrop of wider regional tensions involving Iran, Israel, and the United States, raising concerns that Lebanon could once again become the central arena of a broader confrontation. Well, to discuss this, joining us now from Lisbon is the political analyst Nuno Martins. Nuno, very good to have you on the show. Great to see you there. Is Israel trying to change as much as it possibly can on the ground now before any ceasefire negotiations kick in, do you think?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I do believe that the reason why Israel is attacking in Tyre is because probably Hezbollah has moved and has started attacks from other places in order to attack Israel. So the question is also regarding that. I don't believe that the situation is basically to try to move and to get as much leverage to deal with the Lebanese government, because as you know, who is negotiating with Israel is the Lebanese government, it's not Hezbollah, and that makes the whole difference. And if you also see the recent declarations by President Aoun, it shows clearly that the situation is to block Hezbollah and to stop the conflict as soon as possible, and to go also to have Israel beyond the line of the river Latini. So the question is, I think, to say what I said in the beginning, that mainly these movements are to attack, to impeach Hezbollah attacks from Lebanon towards Israel.
And why are we seeing evacuation orders, Nuno, expanding into areas that previously were considered pretty safe?
Well, because most probably the Hezbollah, they also moved to those areas. You know, the tactics used by the group is to be among the population. We saw that also with Hamas in Gaza. This is not new. And the question is, if the Israeli secret service, the army secret service has information that some of these attacks, some of these Hezbollah operators are moving into these areas, then they want to attack or at least to ask civil people to evacuate from these areas because they are going to be under attack. I cannot tell you exactly what it is, but that it looks like in previous situations that was the case, and it looks like here we are facing more or less the same situation.
How much influence does Iran still have over the pace and direction of events that are occurring in Lebanon?
In terms of political will, of course, Iran has a lot of leverage over Hezbollah. I do not think that they have any, let's put it like this, any way of giving Hezbollah more than this political support. Moreover, it is clear that the leverage of Iran within the government of Lebanon, within the country itself, is very much reduced. And this started by all means since Assad left Syria. And it's going more and more since you could see there was a recent op-ed written by Condoleezza Rice, and we could see that the reason why Iran also do not go beyond in terms of attack is also because the capacity of Iran individually or to help its proxies is very diminished in my view.
Now, Lebanon, I guess to some degree, has become one of the main pressure points in this whole wider confrontation, hasn't it? We were talking with our studio guest a few moments ago about, where barriers stop and start and red lines that then become not red lines anymore. I'm just wondering this is just going to keep continuing on and on and on, isn't it? Because Israel can just say, well, we've got intelligence that Hezbollah is a little bit further beyond where we said we were going to reach. So they go a little bit further, little bit further, little bit further. Iran is outraged each time that happens. So we're never going to be able to break out of this sort of cycle.
Well, yes and no. Meaning that what you're saying is correct. If Hezbollah keeps a certain leverage in military ways, but if we look to the negotiations between the Lebanese government and the Israeli government, the idea is to pass some of the areas, these considered buffer zones, controlled by the IDF, into the Lebanese army directly, not to give the Hezbollah the opportunity to go and to control this on one hand. On the other hand, it is also in the, let's call it the agreement, the comprehensive agreement that they are trying to sign over the 22nd of June, which will also compromise that the Lebanese government will be responsible to disarm Hezbollah. We now saw also some recent declarations by the UN Secretary General, where he defends that Hezbollah must disarm, and also that everybody should agree on the ceasefire agreement. So this is the tendency is to, to put Hezbollah in the corner. If it doesn't happen, it goes, as you said, it goes on hand. This has been going for years, for decades. It was the same thing with Hamas in Gaza for decades. They have been doing that since 2000. The question is, I do believe this is a turning point. The idea of the Israeli government is to really try to, at least to make Hezbollah the only viable solution, to be a political party, no more than that. And this is a huge opportunity for the Lebanese government to control that and to have what they used to have in the past, vibrant democracy, inclusive democracy with full of religious groups, minorities living together in a certain peaceful way. And unfortunately, since the 1970s, it doesn't exist anymore.
It's very interesting what you say, because there has been strong criticism of the Lebanese government, saying they haven't got to grips enough with the problem of Hezbollah. But from what you're saying, it could be that it's the Lebanese government that in the end becomes the actor that actually finally gets this peace deal across the line.
Well, I said that, and it's true, but to achieve what I just said, the Lebanese government needs the leverage and the capacity to do that, because as you know, for let's say until 10 years ago, Hezbollah had the capacity, if not even beyond that, to control the whole country within 24 hours, not only the south, but the whole country. And what is very interesting when you see the analysis about the situation in Lebanon is that everybody is wondering why Hezbollah is not on the table talks with Israel. That's exactly the point. Hezbollah is not in the table talks, and the surprise came that the Lebanese government accepted and pushed for peace talks with Israel without Hezbollah is exactly because to make and to Hezbollah in the corner, to put them in the corner, and to eventually disappear. But the only credible, let's say, institution who can do that at the end of the day is the Lebanese government in the end. Because if it's not the Lebanese government doing that, let's say the Lebanese government, the Lebanese authority, then it will create a problem for Israel and for the Lebanese authorities if it's done by Israel. This is almost impossible to be achieved by Israel alone.
Nuno, always great to get your insight. Thank you very much indeed.
Likewise. Let me just say one thing, if you don't mind. I want to say, it's important when I say the Lebanese government, it's in an agreement with the US and with the Israeli authorities. I wouldn't be surprised that both of them would help the Lebanese government achieving this.
Nuno,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business stories shaping the day with Katie Wilson. Don't go away. Welcome out, you're watching Primetime, and Katie Wilson has joined us, bringing us the business. Katie, what have you got on the agenda tonight?
Everything's building up to SpaceX's stock market debut, so we'll get the latest on that as well as an ambitious 5-year plan for BYD. But first, if you've been to South Korea, you'll know that Kakao is everywhere. Kakao Talk, Kakao Friends, Kakao Taxi. And now workers at the tech giant have staged a strike demanding changes to the company's bonus system. Employees are warning of further industrial action later this month if negotiations fail.
Unionised workers at South Korea's Kakao staged a 4-hour strike and rally on Wednesday. They demanded job security and changes to the tech firm's bonus system. Hundreds of workers wearing black T-shirts and holding white umbrellas walked out of Kakao's office in the morning. The union had told police as many as 1,200 members would join the rally. Local media reported the union plans a general strike for June 29th, with all 5,000 members due to take part. Kakao operates South Korea's biggest messaging app by users and employs about 6,000 people. The dispute comes with growing labour unrest in South Korea as tech firms score record earnings during the global AI boom. The Samsung Electronics Union got a deal this month tying chip division bonuses to 10.5% of operating profit. Kakao said last month it had failed to reach a wage deal with the union in government-mediated talks. The union wants reform to Kakao's compensation system. They argue executives have received higher bonus payments in recent years while other employees have seen limited benefits. Kakao previously said it had turned down a union demand for profit sharing, calling it unrealistic. The union refused to confirm details on the negotiation. Kakao said Wednesday it's running a real-time system in response to the strike. It added management will keep talking with the union.
Staying in South Korea, chipmaker SK Hynix could soon join the rush of companies tapping into US markets. Sources say the AI giant is preparing a share listing as early as August, aiming to ride investor enthusiasm for artificial intelligence.
SK Hynix reportedly plans to list its shares in the US as soon as August. That's according to 2 sources familiar with the matter. The South Korean memory chip maker wants to capitalise on strong appetite for AI-linked stocks and broaden its investor base. One source added the US Securities and Exchange Commission is likely to approve SK Hynix's American listing application during the week of June the 22nd. SK Hynix said in March it had confidentially filed for a US listing. A source said at the time the offering could raise as much as $14 billion. The company is the world's second largest memory chip maker and a key supplier of NVIDIA. It scored big in the AI boom due to its dominant position in bandwidth memory chips used in AI servers. Its share price has jumped 240% this year, and its market value has topped $1 trillion since May. That makes it only the third Asian company after Taiwan's TSMC and Samsung Electronics to hit the milestone. An August debut would also add another top name to what is shaping up to be a busy second half for US equity markets.
Staying in the AI sector, Anthropic is making one of its most powerful models available to the public, but with strict limits on how it can be used. The company says new safeguards are designed to prevent the technology from being deployed in high-risk areas, such as cybersecurity.
Anthropic is rolling out a public version of its Mythos AI product, but with limits on its use in risky areas like cybersecurity. Dubbed Claude Fable 5, it's said to be the most powerful model yet developed for wider use by the startup. Anthropic has touted its abilities in software engineering and analytics, but the company has also warned that it could pose dangers if it got into the wrong hands. Access to Mythos had been limited to around 200 organizations, including the US government. Now the firm says it has done extensive testing to ensure users can't get around guardrails. Anthropic says anyone asking Fable 5 to look for vulnerabilities in code, for example, will automatically be directed back to a previous generation of its AI models. Tuesday's move to release the product to the public could allow the company to build on the momentum that has seen its valuation top that of arch-rival OpenAI. Both of the AI pioneers have filed for stock market listings, expected to see them valued at around $1 trillion each.
While investor appetite for space and artificial intelligence appears stronger than ever, sources say Elon Musk's SpaceX has attracted hundreds of billions of dollars in demand ahead of its planned stock market debut, putting the company on track for what could become the largest IPO in history.
SpaceX is drawing strong investor demand ahead of what could be the largest IPO on record. Sources have told Reuters the company has already attracted more than $250 billion in interest, over 3 times the roughly $75 billion it plans to raise. Trading in the stock is set to begin Friday on the Nasdaq, with a target price of $135 per share. The high demand underscores strong appetite for the offering, even as global markets remain volatile. Investor interest is being driven in part by SpaceX's growth outlook, including its Starlink satellite internet business and its artificial intelligence offerings. It also has plans for data centers in space. Elon Musk's firm claims in its IPO documents that it is the only company with a commercially viable path to building orbital AI compute at scale. Sources say the company has outlined plans to begin testing space-based AI computing systems by late 2027. SpaceX says the approach could help address constraints on Earth, such as power and infrastructure, by moving data center capacity into orbit. The initiative depends on its giant Starship rocket being able to reduce launch costs, though it has faced repeated development delays. SpaceX is targeting a valuation of around $1.75 trillion in this week's offering.
While demand for SpaceX's stock market debut has been overwhelming, investors are now facing a key question: how much of the company's value is tied to its business prospects, and how much to Elon Musk himself? Let's take a look at whether the so-called Elon premium can live up to the hype.
The blockbuster public listing of SpaceX won't just test the company's fundamentals, it will also test the star power of Elon Musk. His rocket company, which set its share price at $135, is aiming to raise $75 billion, the most ever for an IPO. The deal would value SpaceX at $1.77 trillion, immediately placing it among the top 10 most valuable U.S.-listed firms. But does the so-called Elon premium justify the lofty asking price? CFRA senior analyst Keith Snyder said that when it comes to SpaceX, the sky's the limit.
It would not surprise me if it goes parabolic day one. I don't think it is going to close at 135 when it does IPO. I think the investor sentiment around this, and then also the interest from the investor groups, whether it be institutionals or individuals, is so incredibly high that these shares are just going to get snapped up.
But some investors and analysts say the expensive multiple the stock is expected to trade at brings too much risk. One wealth advisor told Reuters that SpaceX's fundamentals are, quote, really tough, adding that if there weren't lofty expectations, there wouldn't be an IPO. Those lofty expectations include years of rapid growth and flawless execution. But the belief that Musk can create outsized value has long supported high valuations across his business empire. Tesla's success in turning electric vehicles from a niche product into a mainstream industry has helped establish its credibility, making it the world's most valuable automaker. And since SpaceX filed for its IPO, Tesla shares have gained 10%.
And finally, one of the biggest names in electric vehicles is setting its sights even higher. Chinese automaker BYD says it wants to become the world's largest car maker within 5 years, as its chairman seeks to revive confidence after a sharp decline in the company's share price.
Wang Chanfu, chairman of BYD, on Tuesday said he expected the Chinese firm to become the world's largest automaker within 5 years. He was seeking to reassure investors following a steep drop in the company's share price. BYD ranked 6th globally last year with 4.6 million vehicles sold, but it struggled to restore growth after its domestic sales were hit by intensified competition with local peers. Shares of the company have dropped more than 45% from their peak in Hong Kong over the past year, while its Shenzhen-listed stock has fallen by a third. Wang addressed nearly 1,000 stakeholders at the company's annual shareholder meeting. On Wednesday, BYD confirmed that Wang said he wants the company to be the world's #1 automaker, but didn't respond to additional questions from Reuters about other details discussed at the meeting. The firm would need to overtake Japan's Toyota to achieve that goal, which sold more than twice as many vehicles as BYD last year. BYD's exports between January and May grew 65% from a year earlier. Brazil, Britain and Australia ranked as its largest markets. The growth, though, failed to offset a weaker domestic performance, as overall deliveries during the same period fell more than a fifth.
That's your business news for this evening. Back to you, Guy.
Great stuff as always, Katie. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, Russia and Ukraine continue exchanging strikes as questions grow over diplomacy, military support and the direction of the war. Don't go away. Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. Russia and Ukraine have continued to exchange strikes, with both sides reporting attacks on military targets and infrastructure. Well, Moscow says it hit Ukrainian ammunition and fuel depots, energy facilities and troop positions, while air defences intercepted more than 550 drones in the past day. Ukraine says it struck Russian ammunition depots, command posts and logistics hubs. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says US mediation efforts are on hold, although contacts continue. President Volodymyr Zelensky says the coming weeks could be critical for diplomacy, while Bulgaria has announced a halt to military aid for Ukraine. So as fighting intensifies and diplomatic channels remain fragile, is the conflict moving closer to negotiations or further away from them? Well, joining us to discuss this now from Chicago is Marta Farian, Vice President of the Ukrainian World Congress. Marta, great to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Help us characterize, if you will, the stage that Ukraine finds itself in now. Is it entering a diplomatic opportunity, do you think, or simply just a more dangerous phase of the war?
Well, thank you for having me. I look at this phase related to a phrase that President Reagan used, which worked for him at that time, and I believe that it works now, and that is peace through strength. And what happened is that the Ukraine that was supposed to collapse within 1 week, almost 5 years ago, Ukraine has demonstrated to the world that through its innovation in military capabilities in technology, that it has showed strength, and I think that the situation has changed dramatically now. Ukraine is being pummelled by Russia indiscriminately. However, it is a sign, I believe, of desperation by Mr. Putin, because he needs to show his population that they're doing something. Certainly, people in Russia are wondering what is going on, that the mighty Russia cannot achieve its goals, and it's been almost 5 years. And even yesterday, the bombing and the killing of Russia's main military leader related to weaponry in the middle or just outside of Moscow shows that Ukraine really is gaining strength. And the world looks at this, and I think it has an impact. Are we getting closer to negotiations? Possibly in a few months, because at the rate the war is proceeding, at the rate that Ukraine is gaining more and more momentum and support in the international community, I think that the time to sit down and negotiate will be coming in a few months.
Okay, peace through strength makes sense. The resilience, the Ukrainian resilience you speak of, I think is undeniable to the whole world. What about this apparent pause in US mediation? What do you think that tells us about prospects for future negotiations?
Well, just last week we saw that 18 Republicans joined the Democrats in Congress to pass the bill for aid to Ukraine. This is a huge step forward. And members of Congress are looking towards the November election. They want to be reelected, and they know that the majority of the American public supports Ukraine, because people, regular people, are decent, and they look at justice, and they want freedom for others as well. So I think that with some work in the Senate, I think it's possible that the Senate also will be able to pass such a bill. And certainly it is up to a united Ukrainian American community to advance the idea of aiding Ukraine by the United States, even at the White House.
Marta, what do you make of this decision by Bulgaria to halt military aid?
I would think that they are facing a lot of pressure from Russia, and certainly the energy and petroleum issue is probably at the center of their thinking, and certainly Russia, Putin must be putting a lot of pressure on them.
Yes, indeed. Okay, potentially things happening behind the scenes. Do you think Ukraine can sustain pressure on Russia while also maintaining the international support that it's won?
I think that as we have seen in the last 6 months, Ukraine has gained a lot of international support and admiration in the world. And I think that even Russian allies like China, Iran, are seeing that the big bear is not that strong anymore. And such allies look at strengths and opportunities to control their positions with Russia. I think that Russia's position has been weakened, not only with the West, but even with their own allies.
Marta, you've given us a very elegant analysis of the current situation and what's happened leading up to this. What about the months ahead? What are the indicators we should be looking out for that may change the trajectory of this conflict, do you think?
I think the war is being fought on several levels. Military, and Ukraine has demonstrated that militarily it has the most innovative weapons and certainly is getting a lot of new clients. Also, Ukraine is developing new weapons, and we will see what those will be in the next few months. The war is also being conducted on the economic level, and certainly Russia now certainly has economic problems. I think that it's almost miraculous that Ukraine has been able to go on for 5 years almost and absolutely did not collapse economically. It has really a united front, almost a totally united front of its own people. Even civilians have totally given themselves to the cause of their freedom. And of course, there's an information war going on. And I think that Russian disinformation that was quite successful several years ago, I think that people in the world are being very skeptical about what they're hearing from Russia. And people are now getting more sophisticated about disinformation and being careful about what to believe. So Russian trolls, I think, are not as successful as they were before. So I think that going ahead, there's a good chance to sit down and negotiate from a position of strength for Ukraine.
Marta Farian, Vice President of the Ukrainian World Congress, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Primetime.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, after the break, tensions are rising again between Pakistan and Afghanistan after deadly cross-border airstrikes put a fragile ceasefire under renewed pressure. Do stay with us. Welcome back. At least 13 people, including 11 children, have been killed after Pakistan's military carried out airstrikes across 3 Afghan provinces, according to the Afghan Taliban. Now, the strikes mark a renewed escalation between Islamabad and Kabul, despite a fragile ceasefire agreed earlier this year. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details now from Kabul.
According to Afghan government spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid, Pakistan carried out airstrikes in the eastern provinces of Kunar, Khost and Paktika, killing at least 13 people. Mujahid says 11 of those killed were children. He also said at least 14 others were injured, all of them women and children. The Taliban says the strikes violated Afghanistan's airspace and hit civilian homes. This latest incident comes amid long-running tensions between the two neighbors. Islamabad has repeatedly accused Kabul of harboring militants who it says plan and launch attacks inside Pakistan. Kabul denies those accusations and says militancy inside Pakistan is an internal issue for Islamabad to resolve. The latest violence have put the fragile March ceasefire at risk, raising concerns that tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan may flare up again, despite China's mediation efforts. For now, Kabul is accusing Pakistan of targeting civilians, while Islamabad has yet to respond publicly to the Taliban's claims. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Well, Pakistan has defended the cross-border operations targeting militant hideouts in Afghanistan, raising fresh concerns about stability along one of the region's most volatile frontiers. Hira Mustafa reports now from Islamabad.
Pakistan's Information Minister Ataullah Tahir says precision and collaborated strikes were carried out along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border in response to recent terrorist incidents inside the country. He cited attacks including a suicide vehicle bombing on a military post in North Waziristan on June 2nd and an attack on a federal constabulary post on June 9th, as well as an attack on a police station in Bannu in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Tahir said the operations targeted alleged hideouts and safe havens of militant groups operating across the border. He added that while Pakistan remains committed to peace in the region, it will not compromise on the safety of its citizens. And the military campaign against militancy will continue until such groups are eliminated. The statement comes as tensions escalate with Kabul. The Afghan Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid has accused Pakistan of carrying out aerial strikes in Afghanistan's eastern provinces of Kunar, Khost and Paktika, claiming women and children were among those killed and dozens injured. Islamabad accuses Afghanistan of providing safe havens to militant groups to carry out cross-border attacks. The Afghan Taliban denies the allegations and blames Pakistan for its own security failures, calling the issue an internal matter. In February, Islamabad said it was in an open war with Kabul after a surge in militant violence inside Pakistan. A ceasefire was later reached in March during China-hosted talks, briefly easing tensions along the border. But it has repeatedly been tested by renewed clashes and reported cross-border strikes. Earlier this year, hostilities along the frontier intensified, including Pakistani air operations, targeting areas inside Afghanistan such as Kabul and Kandahar, where Taliban leadership is based. According to a United Nations report published last month, at least 372 Afghan civilians were killed and nearly 400 injured in the first 3 months of the year. Relations between the two neighbors have remained deeply strained since the Taliban's return to power in 2021, with cross-border militancy remaining a major sticking point. Hera Mustafa for A News, Islamabad.
So relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan appear then to be entering another dangerous phase. Pakistan accuses Afghanistan of providing safe havens for militant groups, while Kabul rejects those allegations and says Islamabad is attempting to shift blame for its own security challenges. With China having invested diplomatic capital in reducing tensions between the two sides, the latest escalation is also raising broader questions about regional stability and security across South and Central Asia. Well, joining us now to discuss all of this is Hamza Azhar Salam, editor of the Pakistan Daily, who's joining us from Lahore. Hamza, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. This March ceasefire, I mean, it's pretty much collapsed, hasn't it?
Well, absolutely. It's a very precarious situation. And even previously, we've seen that even after ceasefires have been announced, the Afghan Taliban have not honored them. We continue to see terror activity in Pakistan, which is orchestrated from Afghanistan, facilitated from Afghan soil. And the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is active in Pakistan and Afghanistan. The leadership of the Afghan Taliban is actively supporting them. And this is the bone of contention between these two neighbors, which have historically enjoyed better relationships, but they have been in a low intensity conflict for many months now. And it seems that the tensions have escalated once again.
And what is the message of Pakistan to the world now? I mean, obviously, they're sending a military message, but are they also sending a political one?
Well, yes, Pakistan will do whatever it can to protect the security of its citizens and its security personnel. Now, these particular airstrikes came in the aftermath of a terror attack by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan against Pakistani security personnel. 6 Pakistani security personnel lost their lives, after which Pakistan conducted calibrated airstrikes on terror infrastructure, on ammunition depots and training centers. So Pakistan claims that it did not target civilians, but there have been reports that some of these militants and terrorists are also using civilians as a human shield. So it's a very complicated situation. And as you mentioned, China is also involved in diplomatic efforts and mediation. Turkey and Qatar have also tried to mediate this conflict, but so far it seems that they have not been successful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, why is that? Because these are powerful, diplomatically highly skilled countries that you've just mentioned, and yet still we haven't quite got anything that looks like a sort of a path to stability in this conflict. Why have those great nations struggled?
Well, it seems that it goes back to the Afghan Taliban's incapability and unwillingness to control terror groups operating from Afghanistan. Now, the Afghan Taliban has a lot of ideological roots with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. The Emir of the TTP owes allegiance to the leader of the Taliban. We have seen fighters who belong to both organizations and fight for both organizations. So it's very difficult for them to control the TTP, even though it is the primary bone of contention between Pakistan. Now, initially, after the fall of Kabul, the Pakistani government supported the Afghan leadership, and the foreign minister of Afghanistan visited Pakistan multiple times. And it appeared that there would be better relations, but primarily because of the Afghan Taliban's inability and unwillingness to restrict the TTP and other terror groups, this is the core reason of the conflict and why these nations are failing.
And which one is it, do you think? I mean, or is it, which one is the greater criticism? Is it a lack of willingness to tackle the militancy, or is it what you might call an incompetence?
Well, I would lean towards the incompetent side because we also see a lot of fissures between the Afghan Taliban leadership itself. Now, there's one Haqqani group which is based in Afghanistan. It has the Interior Ministry. It has a lot of influence in Kabul. Then we have the Kandahar group, which is led by the current Emir Hebatullah Akhundzada. So we see a lot of friction between the Afghan Taliban itself. And now with these splinter groups, it appears that the Taliban Emir does not have authority over these splinter groups. It also appears that he does not have authority over his own government and his own organization as much as he would perhaps like. So I would say that it is the incapability of the Afghan Taliban which has resulted into this mess of relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan, which could have been much better if the TTP was restricted.
And Hamza, on this show, we always like to ask our experts about timelines when we're discussing conflicts. I mean, what is your expectation, your instinct for how long this may go on, how long it may continue to escalate for?
Potentially, it could go on for years because it seems that the TTP is well funded, well oiled. Pakistan has also accused India of supporting the TTP and providing intelligence, not just to the TTP, but also to the Afghan Taliban. We have also seen growing relations between the Taliban regime and the Indian government. So it could perhaps be a prolonged conflict. And Pakistan is absolutely ready. Pakistan is the superior military force in this conflict. And Pakistan is trying to change the calculus in a way that it's trying to show Afghanistan that if it exports terror to Pakistan, then the response will be conducted in Afghan soil.
Very interesting indeed. Hamza, great to speak to you. Thank you so much for your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you for...
Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime. Good to have you with us this evening. Okay, let's check in with our correspondents now around the world. And Europe's ambitions for greater defence independence have suffered a major setback as a flagship project designed to develop a next-generation fighter jet collapsed after years of political and industrial disagreements. Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the collapse of Europe's most ambitious fighter jet project deals a major blow to Emmanuel Macron's vision of closer European defense integration. France and Germany abandoned plans to jointly develop a next-generation combat aircraft under the Future Combat Air System, or FCAS. That ends nearly a decade of work on a project once seen as the future of European defense cooperation. It was launched by Macron and former German Chancellor Angela Merkel back in 2017 as a symbol of a more independent and militarily capable Europe. Instead, it fell victim to years of disputes between France's Dassault Aviation and Airbus, which represents German and Spanish interests. The companies failed to agree on leadership, access to intellectual property, and work sharing, leaving Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz unable to break the deadlock. For years, Macron argued that Europe must achieve greater strategic autonomy, the ability to defend itself without relying so heavily on the U.S., while FCAS was meant to prove Europe could build the next generation of military technology together. Instead, critics will see its collapse as evidence that Europe still struggles to translate political ambition into industrial reality. At a time when Russia remains a security threat and Washington demands Europe do more for its own defense, the collapse of FCAS raises fresh doubts about Europe's ability to develop critical military capabilities on its own. Now, some elements of the program may survive, including a secure combat cloud linking aircraft and drones. But the fighter jet was the project's centerpiece. Its demise may become one of the clear symbols of Europe's defense ambitions crashing before ever leaving the runway. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Georgia and the European Union are set to hold a critical meeting on Wednesday over the possible suspension of visa-free travel, as both sides offer starkly different readings of what the talks mean and what is at stake. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports now from Tbilisi.
On June 11, Georgian officials will sit down with the European Commission representatives for the first formal dialogue session since the EU activated its visa liberalization suspension mechanism against Georgia. Both sides agree on the date, but they agree on very little else. European Commission spokesperson Markus Lammert was direct about why the process was launched. In March 2026, the Commission suspended visa-free travel for Georgian citizens holding diplomatic and service passports for an initial period of 12 months following agreement among EU member states. Lammert said that the Commission believes Georgian authorities have undermined the core principles on which visa liberalization rests, including respect for human rights and democratic norms, calling their actions incompatible with EU values. Georgian Foreign Minister Maka Bocharishvili pushed back on the political framing surrounding the meeting entirely. She described it as a routine technical consultation required automatically under EU regulations whenever the suspension mechanism is triggered, and urged politicians and activists to stop using it as a pressure tool, warning that the speculation was damaging Georgia's relationship with the EU. Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze went further, calling suggestions that Georgia could lose visa-free travel outright blackmail, and said that Georgian society was informed enough not to be affected by it. Lammert, for his part, confirmed that the June 11th meeting would be purely technical, with no public statement or briefing expected afterward. The EU, opposition groups and the civil society organizations have consistently offered sharply different assessments of Georgia's democratic trajectory from those of the ruling Georgian Dream government. Wednesday's meeting is unlikely to resolve that gap, but it will mark the first official moment both sides address it face to face. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Well, China and Georgia have elevated their bilateral relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership, marking a new phase in cooperation between the two countries. Now, the announcement was made as Chinese president and the Georgian president exchanged congratulatory messages on the 34th anniversary of diplomatic relations. Manor Makdoum reports now from Beijing.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and Georgian President Mikhail Kavelashvili have jointly announced the upgrade of China-Georgia relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. In its message, Xi said that the two countries have consistently advanced ties based on mutual trust, mutual respect, and a win-win cooperation over the past 34 years, achieving fruitful outcomes across a range of sectors. She noted that since the establishment of strategic partnership in 2023, political trust has deepened, practical cooperation has accelerated, and multilateral collaboration has become increasingly productive. He said that China views its relationship with Georgia from a strategic and long-term perspective, regardless of changes in their international environment. President Kavelashvili welcomed the evaluation of ties, saying that the new partnership would create more opportunities for cooperation and deliver greater benefits to both countries. The move is expected to strengthen collaboration in trade, investment, connectivity, and people-to-people exchanges, while opening a new chapter in China-Georgia relations. The upgrade shows Georgia's growing importance in China's wider Eurasian connectivity strategy, especially as a transit hub along the Middle Corridor, linking China to Europe via the Caucasus. It also aligns with Beijing's efforts to deepen economic and infrastructure cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative. Mani Makhdoom, A News, Beijing.
Turkish and Syrian officials say economic relations between the two countries are entering a new phase with ambitious plans to boost trade, reopen border crossings and expand investment cooperation. Our correspondent Adam Morrow reports now.
Turkey and Syria are setting ambitious new targets for economic cooperation, as officials from both countries signal a major acceleration in trade and investment ties. Speaking at the Anadolu City Economic Summit in Gaziantep on Tuesday, Turkish Trade Minister Ömer Bolat said that Ankara and Damascus hope to increase annual bilateral trade to $5 billion within the next 2 years and to $10 billion by 2030. Bolat also announced preparations to open new customs gates along the two countries' shared border, including the long-awaited Islahiye crossing. He also said that officials were ready to reopen the route linking Nusaybin in southern Turkey to the Syrian city of Kamishli. According to Bolat, improved border infrastructure and transit procedures will play a key role in facilitating cross-border trade and supporting Syria's economic recovery. Speaking at the event, Syrian Economy Minister Mohammed Nidal al-Shar described Turkey as Syria's natural partner, calling for deeper economic integration between the two neighbors. He also invited Turkish companies to participate in reconstruction, industrial, and infrastructure projects, saying Damascus was working to streamline regulations pertaining to trade, investment, banking, and industry. The remarks come as Syria seeks to rebuild its economy after years of conflict and international isolation. Officials say thousands of Syrian factories have resumed operations in recent months, while new production lines are being established across the country. For Turkey, the reopening of economic channels with Syria promises to enhance cross-border trade, improve regional connectivity, and create fresh opportunities for both exporters and investors. Tuesday's summit in Gaziantep comes amid stepped-up efforts to normalize economic ties between the two countries, with both governments increasingly emphasizing trade, investment, and reconstruction as key pillars of their future bilateral cooperation. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Uzbekistan is strengthening its air defense and military aviation capabilities. A new presidential decree oversees the creation of a combat command of the Air Force and the introduction of a modern digital control system. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
Uzbekistan is continuing reforms aimed at strengthening the protection of its airspace and national borders. President Shavkat Mirziyoyev reviewed measures to modernize the country's air defense and air force systems. A new presidential decree provides for the establishment of Air Force Combat Command based on the existing command structure. The new body will operate using a modern digitalized command and control system. The decree also outlines measures to increase combat readiness through the creation of new units equipped with precision-guided weapons, modern aircraft and unmanned aerial systems. Special attention is also being given to personal training. The Military Aviation Institute in Kashi region has been upgraded in line with international educational standards and equipped with modern simulators and training technologies. Cadets receive both theoretical and practical instruction, including flight training at the Khanabad airfield. Defense Minister Shuhrat Holmuhamedov described the decree as a historic step, stating that the reforms are expected to double the combat capabilities of military and air defense units, while strengthening the country's ability to protect strategic facilities from potential aerial threats. It is Sivil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
The European Union is preparing a new sanctions package against Russia. And this time, companies in Central Asia may also come into focus. Well, as Brussels looks at ways to tighten enforcement, questions are emerging over possible sanctions circumvention routes. Fariza Kalamazina reports.
Central Asian countries could soon come under new European Union sanctions over ties with Russia. Brussels is preparing its 21st sanctions package, and this time the focus could extend beyond Russian companies to businesses in third countries suspected of helping Moscow bypass restrictions or maintain critical revenue channels. The warning came from the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, who says pressure on Russia must increase by targeting networks used to circumvent existing sanctions. At the same time, the European Union plans tighter export controls on around 50 companies worldwide. Countries mentioned include Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, China, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates and India. More than 30 entities linked to drone production are also expected to be included. EU officials have not yet revealed which companies could be affected, and the final list has yet to be published. The package is also expected to expand restrictions on Russian banks, oil-related businesses, crypto platforms and defense-linked firms, while limiting exports of metals, chemicals and industrial components that could potentially be used for military purposes. And according to the European Commission, the package could be formally presented before June 14th, before being sent to EU member states for approval. Fariza Kalimurdzina, Almaty, A News.
Following a knife attack in Belfast, anti-immigration unrest has escalated across several parts of Northern Ireland. Hundreds took to the streets, with clashes breaking out between protesters and police amid rising tensions. Well, the violence has drawn strong responses from both local officials and the UK Prime Minister.
The anti-immigration riots in Belfast, Northern Ireland, have been strongly condemned by officials. During the violence, some families were forced to leave their homes, vehicles were set on fire, and police were attacked. The unrest began following a knife attack on June 9th. A 30-year-old Sudanese man has appeared in court charged with attempted murder in connection with the incident. Widely circulated footage on social media shows that the seriously injured victim reportedly lost one eye. Following the incident, hundreds of protesters, many of them masked, took to the streets across various parts of Northern Ireland. During the demonstrations, vehicles were set on fire, roads were blocked, and police officers were targeted. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that those responsible would face the full force of the law.
This morning I spoke with the First Minister, the Deputy First Minister and the Chief Constable. And the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is meeting leaders in Belfast today. We are united in calling for calm and determined to restore order, support the police and all those on the front line, and ensure that justice is done.
Alongside the unrest in Belfast, it has also been reported that small anti-immigration protests were held in London, Glasgow and Edinburgh.
Around the world, governments are moving to restrict children's access to social media. But the debate over who should decide, parents, platforms, or the state, is becoming increasingly contentious. Well, as more countries consider age limits and verification requirements, Azerbaijan is now preparing its own framework aimed at tightening rules for young users and social media companies.
Children are growing up online, but governments are increasingly questioning how early that journey should begin. What emerged as platform guidelines is rapidly turning into government regulation. At the end of 2023, only one OECD member was considering social media age restrictions. Less than 3 years later, that number has risen to 25. Australia has led the way, introducing a nationwide restriction for users under 16. Similar approaches are now being developed in countries including France and Norway, while the United Kingdom and Denmark are exploring their own versions of age limits and usage controls. Despite their differences, most countries are gravitating toward age limits of 15 or 16. Others, including Austria, Canada, Thailand and parts of the United States, are looking at thresholds of 13 or 14. So far, only Australia, Brazil and Indonesia have enacted laws. The remaining 22 countries are still consulting on proposals, a reminder that turning policy into law can take years. The debate remains highly controversial. Critics say mandatory age checks could increase data collection, reduce privacy and restrict free speech. Many believe decisions about children's social media use should remain with parents rather than governments.
As we know that every citizen has certain age to obtain the ID, certain age to obtain the passport, certain age to be able to vote, certain age for a lot of things. But then why do not we have a certain age to have an access to the social media? Well, that should be from, the government can do that. But if the government even does it, who will check that kid in the house? So it's the responsibility of the parents, because they are the one who are bringing them up. So they tell them each and every good and bad of the society and all that initially. And then it's the responsibility of the school he or she is going. And obviously the government has to take its own measures.
The United Nations has cautioned that blocking children from social media is no substitute for making platforms safer in the first place. In May, the UN Human Rights Office called on governments and technology companies to move faster to protect children online through stronger safeguards.
States need to require tech companies to embed safety into their platforms by design, instead of shifting the burden to parents and children. Whatever regulations are adopted, it is essential to avoid inadvertently causing further harms. For example, age verification done wrong can both fail at its goal and endanger the privacy of both kids and adults. Protection of children online needs to be done right.
Here in Azerbaijan, lawmakers are advancing amendments that would introduce age-based restrictions on social media use and clarify the responsibilities of platform operators. Under the proposed framework, children under 16 would not be permitted to register on social media platforms. Young people aged 16 to 18 would only be allowed access with the consent of a legal guardian. As countries work to make the internet safer for children, one thing is clear: age limits alone are not enough. Governments, parents and tech companies all have a role to play.
NASA named 3 American astronauts and 1 Italian astronaut for the next Artemis mission, which is due to launch late next year. Now the 4-person crew will carry out a spacecraft docking demonstration in low Earth orbit, testing lunar landers developed by SpaceX and Blue Origin for the first time in space. The mission is designed to prepare for future astronaut landings on the moon under NASA's Artemis program. Artemis 3 will be the final planned mission before it attempts to return humans to the lunar surface. The European Union is weighing sweeping institutional reforms to strengthen its global geopolitical stance. From structural mergers to new defence mechanisms, proposals in Brussels are exposing deep divisions among member states over sovereignty and military coordination. Our team breaks down now the core of these strategic debates.
As global diplomatic dynamics shift, the European Union is examining its capacity to influence major international events. Political analysts note that while the bloc was founded primarily as a peace project, navigating modern geopolitical friction has sparked a push for more coordinated action. EU High Representative recently addressed these challenges, specifically focusing on the debate surrounding European military coordination.
Defense is a national competence, and we are trying to push member states to work more jointly together, because also if the member states are strong, also the European pillar in NATO is strong. Now, why I don't support additional army, it's because, you know, every member state has one army. That's why it is very important that we don't create structures that could create confusion, but not to create alternative army to those armies that already exist.
Beyond military structures, administrative reforms are also under review. One major proposal includes merging the EU's External Action Service directly into the European Commission. However, foreign policy experts point out that this has highlighted differing views on the division of powers between Commission President and High Representative, raising concerns among several member states regarding the centralisation of authority. Decision-making rules are another point of contention. Germany and Sweden support moving from a consensus model to a qualified majority vote for foreign policy. Conversely, nations like France and Belgium argue for maintaining the veto power to preserve individual national sovereignty. The debate also extends to long-standing concepts, such as the potential establishment of an EU Security Council, an idea dating back to the 1980s. Proponents suggest a smaller, concentrated format could eliminate the need for 27-member consensus, with some defence observers proposing the inclusion of the United Kingdom due to its significant role in continental defence. However, the initiative faces formal opposition. Smaller EU member states have officially raised concerns regarding their exclusion from high-level decision-making, while several security delegations argue that a separate council could overlap with existing NATO frameworks. As institutional debates continue in Brussels, the proposal remains unadopted due to these unresolved sovereign and transatlantic concerns.
The Ebola outbreak in Africa is becoming increasingly difficult to contain, according to reports. Health authorities are warning that shortages of resources, insecurity and growing international travel restrictions could complicate efforts to stop the virus from spreading.
Health authorities in Africa are facing growing challenges in containing the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda, as the number of confirmed cases has surpassed 600 and the death toll has climbed above 100. According to the Africa Centres for Disease Control and Prevention, the vast majority of infections have been recorded in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where dozens of new cases continue to be reported. Uganda, meanwhile, has not recorded any new confirmed infections in the latest reporting period. The Centres for Disease Control warns that response efforts are being hampered by serious operational constraints, including insecurity, shortages of ambulances and medical supplies, deteriorating health facilities and poor road infrastructure. In some affected areas, health centres lack clean water, protective equipment and decontamination materials. Officials have also highlighted community mistrust as a major obstacle to containment efforts, complicating surveillance, contact tracing and public health interventions. The United States has urged European countries to consider travel restrictions for people who have recently visited affected countries after Washington imposed its own entry measures covering the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Uganda and South Sudan. US officials say the restrictions are intended to prevent the spread of the virus, while the Africa CDC has expressed concern that travel measures imposed despite international health guidance could negatively affect response operations.
Somali soccer referee Omar Abdulkadir Artan has arrived in his home country's capital, Mogadishu, to a rapturous welcome by fans and officials after he was denied entry into the United States ahead of the World Cup.
Cheers echoed through Mogadishu on Wednesday. Somali referee Omar Abdulkadir Artan returned home after being denied entry to the United States ahead of the FIFA World Cup. Artan, who had been set to make history as the first Somali official at football's biggest tournament and was recently named Africa's Referee of the Year for 2025, was turned back over the weekend by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. U.S. authorities said on Tuesday that the decision was linked to alleged ties to suspected members of terror organizations, a claim that has drawn attention and controversy. Speaking upon his return to Somalia's capital, Artan described the situation as fate and expressed gratitude for the support he received from FIFA.
What happened has happened, and it is fate. FIFA has supported me well, and they have been following my journey closely up till now. I promise you that in the upcoming matches, I will go further and leave a positive mark. Somalia is ours, whether things are good or bad. I want to tell our youth not to lose hope in our country. That flag is ours.
His return to Mogadishu drew a warm reception, with senior government officials, including the sports minister, the defense minister, and senior representatives from the Somali Football Federation, present to welcome him at the airport. The Somali government said it had attempted to resolve the issue through talks with both U.S. officials and FIFA, but those efforts were unsuccessful, leaving his World Cup dream unfulfilled.
Turkey has formally confirmed its role as the host of this year's UN Climate Summit after signing the COP31 host country agreement in Bonn, Germany. Now, Turkey's Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change Minister Murat Kurum signed the agreement during the Bonn Climate Change Conference. Minister Kurum, who also served as COP31 president, signed the protocol with Simon Steele, head of the UN climate body. He said cooperation between Turkey and the UN Secretariat would continue to deepen ahead of the summit.
Here in Bonn, we want to further expand the circle of consultations. Our goal is to make our agenda more mature, more inclusive, and stronger together. We have built COP31 on dialogue, consensus, and action, with the contributions of our stakeholders. With an implementation-focused vision, we have positioned it as the COP of the future. At the same time, we want to turn climate commitments into concrete actions, and those actions into measurable results.
Pope Leo XIV led a vigil attended by more than 40,000 people at Barcelona's Olympic Stadium on Tuesday as part of his visit to Spain. Now, the event combined prayer, music and personal testimonies, including an account from a teenager whose father had attempted to kill her mother. During the gathering, the Pope reflected on domestic abuse and violence against women, a theme he addressed in the following remarks.
So many crime reports, even today, reflect a toxic climate in family relationships marked by abuse and oppression, and in particular by violence against women, which unfortunately often leads to femicide. We are all called to address this dramatic reality, both personally and as a society, because we are responsible for confronting it in all its dimensions. If violence exists, if selfishness prevails, if even love among family members turns into hatred, we must question the dynamics of our society, the culture of individualism, and the temptation of violence, but not God.
Days after a powerful earthquake struck the southern Philippines, many survivors remain without basic supplies as damaged roads hamper relief efforts. Families are also coping with trauma, loss and uncertainty as search and rescue operations continue.
Residents in the southern Philippines are struggling to rebuild their lives after a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck off the coast of Sarangani province early on Monday. Drone footage showed excavators clearing debris as residents searched through the wreckage of their homes for anything they could save. Many families have been left without shelter, clean water and food. One of them is 57-year-old Sayaron Gampong, whose house collapsed in the disaster.
Even a small amount of aid hasn't arrived, not even a little. They said the roads here are badly damaged, so maybe that's why they can't reach us, because of the condition of the roads.
The disaster has also left deep psychological scars. In General Santos City, government employee Janelyn Dinaga described how she escaped a collapsing building with her niece. She said strong aftershocks and fears of further collapses have left many children traumatized.
The children have been traumatized. Even a slight shaking makes my kids cry. Even when they're in a deep sleep, they wake up and rush outside.
Dinaga said families are still waiting for assistance as power and water supplies remain disrupted. For some families, hope has already turned to grief. A 65-year-old Dioslinda Deluvio has been waiting outside a collapsed commercial building where her son Joey is believed to be trapped. Rescuers told her they had detected no heartbeat beneath the rubble and were preparing a recovery operation rather than a rescue.
It's difficult to accept as a mother to know that my son is still trapped there now. I don't know. It's difficult to accept.
Deluvio said she is no longer hoping for a miracle and wants only to recover her son's body. The quake triggered landslides that destroyed homes, blocked roads, and cut off some of the hardest-hit communities. By Wednesday, the National Disaster Agency had raised the death toll to 45, while 17 people remained missing.
And finally tonight, tennis star Serena Williams has been back on court after a 4-year break. Well, the 44-year-old played doubles alongside Canadian teenager Victoria Mboko at the Queen's Club Championship in London. Well, after winning the game, the 23-time Grand Slam singles winner shared her own reflections.
Oh my God, I think I would give myself a, what do you think? C minus?
I mean, it's funny because there was moments in the match where we were kind of just like, oh, this isn't going great, or we kind of. It's very self-critical, but I understand, it feels like it was far from our level a little bit, but don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, so overall, I think it was decent.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of Prime Time for tonight. Please do come back and join us tomorrow though for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.